Welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. This podcast is designed to provide momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. Whether you're a pastor, youth leader, ministry volunteer, parent, or student, we want to be your go-to and most trusted resource for equipping and encouragement when it comes to your ministry and leadership influence. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to another Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. My name's Eric and I am excited to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us for this episode, whether you're watching us on YouTube, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited that you press play and that you're joining us for this episode and this conversation. If you missed last week, this is kind of technically part 2 of a conversation that we did last week, which officially was not last week. We recorded an episode with Dan Gregory, who's the campus pastor at Norton Grace Church in Norton, Ohio. And Dan was a speaker at Momentum Youth Conference this past summer. And Rothen, it is not summer anymore. I wish I could say that it was, but that episode, that conversation was one that we did with intention to hear from a senior pastor's perspective, how to invest in your staff and ultimately in your student ministry, as Dan has done a phenomenal job of that. And so we thought, let's do the other side of that equation, and let's interview a youth pastor. And I'll just, full disclosure, I'll tell on myself. I had every intention of interviewing a youth pastor at Momentum Youth Conference, because there's a lot of them there, and ask these conversations and this question about how do you lead up? How do you invest in your senior pastor when you're a youth pastor, which, by the way, are transferable principles for the rest of your staff. If you're a children's director, it'll still apply. Don't turn it off. Keep listening. But we never did that, Rothen. We never recorded. So now we have Rothen Bedford with us. Months later on our podcast app, and we're recording this, and we're talking how to invest in your senior pastor from a staff member's perspective, because the dynamics of those relationships in local church are so very important. And honestly, at times it doesn't matter the size of your church, it doesn't matter the scale and scope. If you have 2 team members, pastors on staff together, this is going to be of value to you in your ministry context. And so we really wanted to engage in this conversation. Dan did a phenomenal job. We had some open and honest, really vulnerable conversations. And so we wanted to do kind of a different perspective and a different take on that. And so we have with us Rothen. Rothen has been the full-time student ministry pastor since 2015 at Grace Fellowship Church in Pickerington, which is just outside of Columbus, if you're not familiar with where that is. He's killing it. He's doing an awesome job. In fact, so much so, I'll brag on him. He is our 2024 Youth Pastor of the Year award winner. We surprised him at Momentum Youth Conference this past year. He had no idea. So, Rothen, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you love so much about being at Grace Fellowship and working with Keith Menier and just getting to work with students? What do you love most?
Gosh, man, there's a ton. I mean, I remember I was a student at Grace College, and I was reached out to about doing an internship with Grace. And the Grace Fellowship then is very different than the Grace Fellowship now. And so it's been cool to be an intern at this church that was bustling and booming. There was a lot of energy there, and thinking, man, maybe one day, maybe one day I could work there. And then now sit here and go, it'll be 10 years this January, which is crazy.
Yeah, dude.
No, but it's been so cool and so rewarding to be able to be in a ministry for so long. And it's been so good to be at a church where they care so deeply about students, and to have a senior pastor who cares deeply about developing staff and wants me to lead my students well, wants to make sure I have the freedom to do that well, wants to make sure I have the development to do that well. And so, man, it's hard to like point out the specific things that I love so much about it. But I think being 10 years in, what I love about it now is seeing the long-term fruit of being in a ministry and having even some of my students who I had when they came into our ministry in sixth grade, leading alongside us now and going to camps with us and baptizing their own, kids in their own groups now. That's some of the most rewarding stuff, I
That's
think.
epic.
Yeah.
Epic. Well, Rothen, I didn't tell you, for our audience, Keith Menier is the senior pastor there at your church.
Yep.
Keith has been a speaker at Momentum Youth Conference for a long time. Keith actually sent me a list of things that he said that you should love about working at Grace Fellowship. Do you want?
I love
I'm teasing. He did,
We'll compare and see if we're the same.
but you wouldn't be surprised if he did, right?
I bet he could come up with a few things.
There you go. There you go. We love your church. We love the partnership that we've had for a long time. So, Rothen, let's kind of dive into this conversation here. This is it's hard sometimes, if we're honest, about like having a candid, like authentic conversation about relationships within your team. There's all kinds of studies and statistics that could kind of tell us that your team dynamics matter greatly. Even in the secular world, you can go and look at statistics. I think the number one reason why people leave their job is because of their boss. And so I'm like, that matters in the church context as well. And so if you're a senior pastor and you're listening to this, we hope that you'll be encouraged. If you're a student pastor, a staff member, and you're listening to this, we hope that we're going to give you some helpful, honest, real conversations of things that you can kind of lean into and be aware of and press into, or maybe raise the flag and say, can we talk about this? So we want to equip you in that. So Rothen, let's start maybe with an easy one.
Yeah.
How do you kind of get on the same page with the vision of your church? A lot of times a church has a vision, mission statement, something that for some churches, it's the thing that's on their wall or the front sign out front or your website. But it's really not the thing that you actually do. For others, they like eat, sleep, drink, breathe, vision. Everybody knows it and they can recite it. But for a student ministry or a separate group within ministry within the church, you might have your own mission. How do you sync up? What does that look like? Give us kind of just what you guys do within your student ministry to sync up with the vision of the church.
Yeah. So the vision for Grace is we want to help people live Jesus-centered lives. And that's an easy thing to try to sync up with because everything that we should be doing should be an effort to do that. And so while our student ministries have some like key words that we'll use a lot, we'll say we want to reach, teach, coach, and develop students. We'll end that by saying to live Jesus-centered lives. And so we try to make sure that everything we do ends up pointing back to that. I would also say, like, if you can't get on board with a vision for a church, don't accept the job or apply there. Those are the questions you should be having on the front end.
Yeah.
What really matters to you? What's important? And to the extent of like, what are you staffing? What are you putting money towards? What are you going to come in my office and talk to me about more times than not? And kind of figure that out together. But those are conversations that if you're able to have on the front end, have on the front end. If they put their vision out clearly and you think that it's lacking, and then you jump in and find that to be true, that's a little bit on you that you didn't have those conversations on the front end, or that you thought that was going to miraculously, get better or fix itself. But I think, and we say this at Grace a lot, that we need to, major on the majors. And what is true is that the major components of our ministry should be going after the same things. And I think it's okay if there are minor pieces of our ministries that are different. But our major vision for the student ministry that we're running, for the church that we're a part of, should be very similar. And I don't think that would be a very difficult thing to be able to come to an agreement with. But I would say step one, find that church, look at their, statement of faith, make sure that comes up in the interview process, and make sure that you feel like you could run a student ministry the way you feel like God is leading you to do it within the vision that the church has already set up.
Yeah. That's really good, Rothen. All right. So what if it is different? What if you're there and, you're a year or two in, or you've been there for a while and the church, says, hey, we're going to create a new vision statement. and they form it, they come together, and it's very different, right, from what you've been doing as a student ministry. What would you recommend? Maybe give some advice or
Yeah.
point us in the right direction there. What does that
I
look
would
like?
I would say it's always healthier when you do this in a healthy way, to externalize instead of internalize. So I
Mm.
think sometimes as the student people, we can go, no one asked our opinion. No one cares what we have to say. They always forget about the students, and something could get brought up, and we could go, man, students have nothing to do with that. They don't care, and we internalize that, and we get bitter, and we get frustrated, rather than having a conversation with the senior pastor and go, where do you see students fit into that? And he might have a great answer. And then you're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. Or, oh, I didn't know that that was part of the breakdowns and the drop downs of what, that phrase could mean or what those words imply. And so
Mm.
the first thing I would do is I would have a conversation and say, how do you see student ministry operating within this new vision? And then if there's a disagreement or there's that kind of more room for a conversation, I would come with, here's how I see it. Here's how I think it could flow within this, or here's why I think it should be this way. But I would come prepared to have that type of conversation.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, just ask.
Yeah,
Let's
have the conversation truthfully.
honestly, so many times in I think it's our human nature, but oftentimes in organizations, in the church especially, we overthink things.
Hmm.
We second guess, we make assumptions, we get nervous, we're afraid to ask, and yet all of that can be relieved by just what you said: ask, have the conversation.
Have the conversation, and I do think we get frustrated on what we think the answer might be, and we let that frustration hurt relationships, build resentment and bitterness, almost create this like apathy of like, it doesn't matter anyways. I'm losing passion, all because of a lack of clarity from one conversation that you could have where they could say, no, no, it's like this. And you go, oh my gosh, I
Yep.
wish we would have done that sooner. Don't put yourself in that position. Have the conversation.
Yeah. So good. All right. So maybe you're in a church staff where you don't get time with the senior pastor. How do you go about like getting on his schedule? What do you recommend? Like maybe talk to the church that doesn't have a regular rhythm or routine for a meeting for one-on-one time with the senior pastor. What do you do there?
And I'll be honest, this is that kind of our reality. I don't have regularly scheduled meetings with Keith Manier, our senior pastor. I have them with my boss and some of our campus teams and things like that. But what is true is Keith is very available to staff. And so, whether that means when his door is open and he's in there, I can pop in and I can have a quick conversation with him. If I absolutely need to, I can schedule a meeting, and it can his calendar. I can see, I can find where he has gaps, and when I put meetings on there, he shows up to them. And so, while there might not be regular routines of one-on-one meetings that we have together, he has made himself very available. And again, this where it kind of comes down to us taking the onus here.
Hmm.
It could be very easy for a person in my situation to go for a while and go, man, I don't get that time with my senior pastor and I want it. Or the only time we get with the senior pastor is when they're kind of checking in and going, hey, so I heard, hey, so I saw, and you're like, oh, the only time we're connecting is, over something that's not very positive or something that's frustrating. And I think, again, own that. And if you want to have better conversations, lead up better conversations, schedule them, pop in and share the wins. I think this is a big part of leading up. A great thing happens in your ministry, send them an email or a Slack or a text or however you guys communicate, so that he knows, all of the good things. Uh, I always say, the bad things kind of boil up to the top. People are going to hear that. They're going to see the one broken thing. They're going to get that one email from the parent that wasn't totally satisfied with the completely free event that we did for their kid. They're the one leader that's walking away because they didn't like the way that we led a meeting or, something like that. He'll always hear that. Those things, those people make their voices heard, unfortunately. But a lot of the times, all the good stuff, I am the ceiling for that. It comes up to me and I choose not to take it any higher. And then maybe I get frustrated or someone in my position gets frustrated that people higher than me aren't saying, that's awesome. I was the ceiling for it. And so my ability to find routines and rhythms, whether it is I'm going to schedule a one-on-one meeting, or I'm going to pop into the office and share something, or I'm just going to send again, text, Slack, email, however you guys communicate. That stuff is a lot on us to choose to own that. I'll also say one thing that we do have regularly is we have staff meetings that happen about twice a month. And on one of those, we get a staff meal together. And Keith does a good job of like sitting with different groups of people and us being able to connect with him. And so I once a month can decide to have a lunch with him and talk to him. And we'll talk about everything from movies and TV shows and vacations to whatever. But again, he makes himself available to do that too. So take those opportunities. If you have opportunities like that, take them or make them. Again, schedule the meetings, pop into the office, send the texts and the emails so that they know.
So good. Rothen, talk a little bit more about what does that look like for you of not being the ceiling and passing on the wins to the people above you or the rest of the team? What have you guys found that's successful with that?
Yeah. And so we know this. There's a lot of things that can like be a win when it comes to student ministry, and different student ministry leaders are going to process wins differently. And even like I could pull up a spreadsheet right now that would show you 12 different things that we're tracking in just our like middle school ministry. We're looking at unique attenders and new students and how many per grade and the boy to girl breakdown and just so many things that I can hit a lot of goals on different weeks. And there are some goals that, we don't hit, but even those numbers don't fully share what's going on in your ministry. Right. And you hear from other like student pastors, like, yeah, my senior pastor got really involved in my ministry when their kid got in there. And it's like, well, to some extent, that's the most information that he's gotten about how the ministry's running from the kid that's in there. And if he's not a part of the ministry in a serving role, which we've been blessed, Keith has multiple times been a part of our student ministry in a serving role. This year, he's stepping into our senior group once a month and providing support. So he gets to see it firsthand. But if he doesn't get to see that, and all he gets to see is data sheets where we sometimes hit goals, maybe most of the time hit goals, sometimes don't hit goals, and then emails from people that aren't thrilled with decisions that we're making or something like that. What is true is I get to be there every week. I get to see the student who went from not knowing Jesus, who came because one of our students started an at-school Bible study. And so then she started coming. Now she's leading a Bible study at her school. A kid heard about that at Urban Center Philly. And then he decided he was going to lead a Bible study at his school with 3 other friends, which is a combination of 2 of our campus's middle school students. And they've had on average 100 kids show up at their public school on Wednesday mornings. And guess what? Keith Menier would not know that. Dude. Unless I sent him that story, unless I told him that. Yes. And I think, why wouldn't we want to celebrate and let our bosses know, look at how awesome this ministry is. Isn't this awesome the way that God is blessing it and using these kids? And I think they want to see great things come from their church's student ministries. But again, a lot of the times we keep those things. We become the ceiling of them. And when we get good information, we go, oh, that's awesome. And then we harp on the volunteer who left and the parent who was frustrated, or us not hitting that one goal that we wanted to hit and we set out in front of us. So yeah, I just think if we want our leadership to really know and celebrate the ministry, they have to know what they should celebrate.
So good. So good, Rothen. Thank you for taking that tangent with me.
Yep.
That is super helpful. Honestly, like you're exactly right. You're so spot on, because so many times those things hit the ceiling and it's us. Yep. And we're not passing those wins along. We're not celebrating church world ministry. We think Sunday, Christmas, Sunday, right. Sunday, Easter. We're in youth ministry. It's Wednesday, or Sunday night, whatever it is. And then you forget to like look back and measure effectiveness, evaluate, honestly critique. And maybe sometimes we're doing that, but we're our own worst enemy. Yeah. I myself, I'm so critical, and I forget to think about the wins. I don't even create pathways to celebrate those stories or to hear them. And then when I do, I hold them, and maybe I share them with our volunteers. but to share them to the people above you, your elder board, the rest of your staff, awesome.
And it
Awesome.
feels there was a moment when I started to do this. So I literally, when I was like, I'm going to start leading up, I put a calendar, a repeating calendar event for like every 6 weeks on my calendar that just said email Keith. And he doesn't even know this. If he's listening to this, he will find out that this is something that I did. And I started to email him and a few other people on the executive team. Hey, here's some cool things that are happening. Hey, here's a cool story. And it was a good reminder for me that sometimes that would bing and I would go, oh yeah, okay, well, what should I tell them? And I would look back and be like, oh no, that was really awesome. That was really good. And then there was this minute of like, oh, I don't want to feel like I'm like bragging and then I thought I would only feel like I'm bragging if I feel like I'm the one doing it. Like if I feel like I'm bragging on myself by saying, here's how God's moving in the ministry, then I think I'm the one doing the work of then I'm not giving credit to God the right way. And so I need to remove that a little bit and go, no, God's blessing this ministry in an awesome way. And let me tell you that. And if the one thing that's keeping us is like, but I feel like I'm bragging on myself, then you need to have a clearer reality of what you're actually doing and what God's doing. Because you give more credit to God, and then maybe you wouldn't feel that exact same way.
Yep. That's so good. All right. So Rothen, what do you do if you're in a smaller church? And maybe a lot of time, I experienced this a little bit, even at the beginning of like, as our church was growing and I had a weekly, standing meeting with our senior pastor. And a lot of times it was like brainstorm and like we're working on things together and we're building the church. And, there are parts that would intertwine and then there are other parts that like we'd connect and later and figure like, how do you recommend structuring that so that you don't like feel like you're leaving and you're like, wait, did I just get like 15 more task lists or was that actually a brainstorm? Or how do you structure even that one-on-one time? And I know you've been in student ministry for 10 years. Like you've seen this even with your direct report. Like how do you recommend or maybe give some advice on how to structure that time so that it's not like you're not talking about the wrong things. You're actually getting what you need out of that time. I meet with a lot of youth pastors, and a lot of times I learned they don't ever meet with the senior pastor. And when they do, they don't even know what to talk about. So what do you say to those people?
Well, here's what I would say. That is your meeting. That's not his meeting. I think sometimes we would come to a meeting like that and go, well, they're the boss. Yeah, well, it's about student ministry. And so you get to come and you should come with your list of what we're going to talk about, your list of questions, your list of things I want to try and I want to get your approval on, or however your system works. But I think sometimes we think because they're our boss that we're going to show up and go, what do you want from me? What do you want this time to be? No. And if you want to earn trust, come prepared, come 5 minutes early, dress prepared, look put together, and say, here are the 4 big things I want to talk about today. This, and this. This one is going to be a little bit more brainstorming. I really want your input on. This one, I just want to get your ideas if we can do it or should do it. And these are just 2 updates I want to make sure that you're aware of. Great, let's jump in on it. And I would lead that meeting. Now, almost always, and that's how I operate right now. So my one-on-one with my boss, I come in with my notebook and I say, here's what I have to talk about today. And I go through all of that. And I ask for help in different areas and input and advice and things with managing, all of that. And then at the end, he'll say, okay, and here's what I have for you. And then they'll ultimately have a handful of things that they want me to know too. But I walk into that space thinking this is my meeting. So what do I need to get out of it? Do I need to get approval for things? Do we need to get some ideas figured out for an event that's coming down? Do I just need to update them on some stuff or do I need help? Either way, I'm going to come to that meeting with that list already written out in my notebook, and that's how we're going to start.
So good. That's really helpful, Rothen. Thank you for kind of sharing and walking us through that. Yeah. We could probably do an entire episode and whole conversation around that, but we'll kind of save some of that for another time because I really want to talk about another thing that I see you and your church do really well, and I don't know where this comes from. You guys, it seems like you have fun together. It seems like you actually hang out outside of the office. What does that look like? Because I know churches that a lot of times it is Sunday, Easter, like, and it's all serious, and sure, we have fun because we're doing ministry and enjoying what we get to do,
Yeah.
but like there's not the like connection that you can tell some churches have. How do you create that culture? Is it like, hey, we're just kind of, do you purposely build it in, or do you guys like, hey, let's just go record stupid videos of ourselves and help us have fun, Rothen?
Well, I will say fun is like a staff value. Maybe unofficial, official, unofficial.
Okay.
But one of our staff meetings that we do, like I said, we do 2 a month. One of them, we play a staff game together. And I lead the game, which I've said
Nice.
for a while. I'd love to play the game every once in a while,
But
but
you're the youth pastor. Who else would do the game?
I run the game. And so that's a lot of fun. I mean, that really is. It's a good time. We are a hyper competitive staff, which I also think makes that game time more fun. You get to see different sides of people they don't always see when you're just working on a spreadsheet together or planning for an event, and so that's really
Yeah.
fun. We have on our so we communicate through Slack. That's our like internal communication platform, and we have a fun channel. It's just called All Staff Fun. We today, no joke, they this guy named Skyler, he kind of has a few different roles here at Grace, but one of them is cleaning. Found a full spam flavored Pringles can that was left in our main auditorium, and then just took a picture of it and posted it in the All Staff Fund. Didn't know that they made that. And the interesting part was to see different people's reactions, because some people were very down with that. They wanted to try it. They
Oh
wanted to
no.
but like stuff like that might just come through throughout your day, and then now that's what everyone's talking about as you're walking down the hall. And we decorate our staff offices for Christmas. In fact, most of our little offices have little stockings on them, and we'll drop different presents for different people in there. And just a little bit ago, we all came together as specifically a Pickerington campus, and set up 17 Christmas trees and lit them and listened to Christmas music while we did it. And so we do a lot of stuff together. It's interesting though, because when I was interning at Grace, and then when I first got on staff, it was a very different. The staff was very different. There were way fewer staff. We were all at one campus, and then throughout the course of these 10 years, we're at multiple campuses, and there's a lot of different people on staff, and we're more disconnected in space, like an actual location, than we've ever been as a staff, and so. We don't always get to spend a ton of time together, and we don't even always get to spend a ton of time outside of us working together. There's not a ton of time that we do that, but we had a Pickerington campus staff retreat that was really great. We go on a family ministry like professional development trip a lot of times in the spring, and so we get connected and stay connected through even the people who do what we do at different campuses. And then another point is we try to meet up with our different campus counterparts kind of on a monthly basis, so that we can all stay close and connected. And so I think we've just kept fun as a value that's important to us. And I think that that's trickled down. And so all the way from our professional development staff meeting, where we talk about some of the most serious things that are happening, we'll start with a game, to when we have to decorate or do something different with our space, we try to find a fun way to do it. So I think we just value fun, and it's trickled down from our leaders to our teams and our people. That fun is just something that we care about, and that's made us feel, I think, more connected.
So good. Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned that just had a tremendous impact on me was some of the times where our senior pastor, when I was the youth pastor on staff, if he had a meeting that got canceled, he would come and find, in the early years, he'd come and find me and be like, hey, I was supposed to go to lunch with this guy and something came up and they had to cancel. Do you want to go get sushi? I'm like, heck yeah. Like,
Absolutely.
yes, please. Like, yeah, so like I just have some of those core memories of like, being the 23-year-old youth pastor that's brand new and right out of college, and the senior pastor's like, a meeting got canceled. You want to take a spot and go have lunch? And I'm like, yeah, that meant the world to me.
Yeah.
And so it was just being spontaneous, building that into the culture. The even some people call it just the predetermined yes.
Yeah.
Like, we're in on those things. We're going to find creative ways to do the fun things. So, all right. Rothen, next question for you. Let's talk about trust, right? Trust is a big deal in ministry. It's so imperative. How do you build trust up? How do you get out of the, even like some of the stereotypes, like if something's broken in the building, it's probably the youth ministry. If like there's all those stereotypes, and maybe for a reason, but how do you build trust with your senior pastor? How do you kind of help lead up in regards to that, or earn trust maybe?
And I would say that stereotype is a huge part of it, because there is this stereotype that the student pastor is this unorganized, unplanned, unkept, like um, person who loves students but doesn't really care about safety and doesn't probably communicate well and is less professional than they should be, and all the different things,
Yes, yes, yes,
And
yes.
I wish I could say, and there's no basis for that. But I'm on student ministry Facebook pages and I'll see people post, it's our annual, teen movie night this Wednesday. What movie should we watch? And I'm like, bro, it's once a year annual. This is not the day you should be figuring it out, or
It's Wednesday at like 4:00.
yeah.
Yeah.
What should I teach on this week? I don't think that's my job. I think you get paid for that. And so, yeah, there's a reason why that stereotype exists. I think we have to just be like, so my role, I mean, this wasn't always the case. I've gone from being a director in student ministry to being a pastor of student ministry. And the reality is I am a pastor at Grace who leads students. I'm not, we're getting into semantics, a student pastor. And the only reason why I say it like that is because student pastor has that connotation to it. And I go, no, I'm one of the pastors. There are different pastors on staff. And I want to hold myself to the exact same standard that our organization would hold any pastor to, which means if you want to build trust, you should not be the last one getting into the office. If you're supposed to be there at 9, get there at 8:50. So at 9, you're actually working. Because I know this. I'll get in, put my stuff down, get a coffee. Someone's going to stop me and ask what my wife and I watched on TV that night. Then I'm getting to my office. So get there early. Work hard. That's a silly thing to say. But if every time someone's coming into your office, you're like, playing games in there or listening to music or talking about movies or, something like that, like you're not building trust. You're actually going to create some gaps that suspicion could fill of like, are they always doing this? Is that, when do they actually get their stuff done? So yeah, like actually work hard and make sure that that's seen. Another big thing I already talked about, lead up, make sure those wins don't go silent or unheard. Make sure that they see all those things. Again, silly, but I think really important, dress well, dress for the part. I remember when I first got hired, I dressed like a college student, and I had one of my mentors on staff, I've had multiple, pulled me aside and was like, why are you dressed like a college student? You're not in college anymore. You have a job full time. If parents come in here and want to meet with you, they want to see something that's going to build trust in them. And I thought that's absolutely right. And so there are little things that you can do. But for us, like work ethic is huge.
Yeah.
Have drive, be intrinsically motivated, communicate well. If your senior pastor shoots you an email and it's taking you 48 hours to respond to them, and they have to go, hey, did you get this? Have you seen this? Do you have an answer to this? That doesn't communicate trust. Set goals and reach them. Do the work so that they see them. And then again, they should see that you are at your desk working, if that's how your organization works. And they should see that you are early in and sometimes late out. And again, not to say that like, man, you should be there at 6 a.m. and work till 6 p.m. and don't ever see your family. There is a reality that sometimes I think I have to work against the expectation of what it means to be a student pastor. And if that means showing up 15 minutes earlier, that's what I'm going to do. Because I want people to see that there's a difference between the assumption of what a person would be and who I am, to see that there's a difference.
So good. If anybody is listening to this right now and you're like, these are wonderful things, I'd love to learn more. Jeff Bogue and I also did a whole episode on professionalism in ministry. And we expounded on some of these very things and went a lot deeper in that. So you can go check that episode out. Rothen, that is super good. I think all of what you're saying, I would highlight, exclamation mark, underline. The reality is you build trust by doing what you say you're going to do, like being a dependable teammate, having the drive and the motivation. You're, in essence, you're breaking the stereotypes of what student ministry pastors often are. So
And
awesome.
there will be times that it could break something. There will be times that there's a hole in the wall, or this happens with us sometimes. We'll have 200 plus 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students in here for an event, and it's on us to clean the whole building, and we'll do that, but then we'll forget like a trash bag or something. And how we handle those failures or losses or misses is important too, because we could see the thing that got broke, or that's broken, and go, oh, I hope no one else sees that. Or we could take a picture of it, send it to our boss, and go, hey, I want to let you know about something that happened tonight at our student groups. Or when they say, hey, this happened, you go, hey, I'm bummed that I missed that. Here's our checklist of what we kind of go through before we leave, and that shouldn't have gotten missed. Not, why are people so stressed out about that? That's not a big deal. Don't they care about how many kids came to of course they care about that. But I think too, you lose trust when you don't fail well. We are gonna fail. Like there are at least minor failures daily, weekly, in what we could do or did do or didn't do, and all those things. And how we walk into those and how we communicate through those and lead those up, that's going to build a lot of trust or lose us a lot of trust along the way.
That's good. Yeah. Own it. Keep going.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. All right. That kind of leads into the next part of this, Rothen. Like, how do you handle conflict? Maybe just to give some very hypothetical situations, like if your senior pastor asks you to do something that you really don't want to do or you don't agree with. I'm sure that's never happened in the history of the church. What if you have that exact scenario, right? A kid, we had this happen one time. We did a dodgeball tournament. A student lost, and they were very competitive. They went in the bathroom and punched a hole in the wall.
Love that.
So fun. What do you do in that situation? Like you kind of gave the example. Yeah, take the picture, own it. This happened. But how do you handle conflict when you're trying to lead up? Give some advice, maybe some, here's what I've done. Help us.
I mean, I think always approach those conversations humbly. So if you're in a meeting with your senior pastor, like, hey, I think we should try something like this. And you're going, why in the world would we ever do that? You can genuinely go like, okay, well, what would we want to accomplish with that? Like, what would be the goal for an event like that? What are we trying to get to? What's the heart of that? And maybe they would say, I want to try something new, or this is something that's been missing, or I've been hearing from a lot of people that this is something that they want to start to see more. And then you can go, okay, in the past, we haven't done that for some of these reasons. Is that something that you want me to try to fit into this next year? And if they say yes, then I think you can say, great. Let me think about how that could play out, and I'll get back to you. I think you're going to have times when you don't agree with your boss. That's true of any job. And there are going to be times that your boss says, I really want you to try something this year, or I really want you to try to do something new, that whether you absolutely love that and it's in your bones and you're just so excited for it, or you go, oh, why in the world are they going to have me do that? Like, I don't know if I'm getting it. You have to do it. That's just the part of it. But I think there's probably a reason for why they think that's important, and why you don't think that's important might be where the miss is, that you don't know that reason. You don't know the heart behind why they want you to try something or do something or say something to someone. And so first, get to the heart of it. And then what you might realize is you have very similar feelings about something that's lacking or missing in the ministry, but you would have very different approaches to how you would solve it. So then you'd go, okay, so I agree. We could definitely do more development of our students to be leaders in the church at large, not just in the student ministry. I don't know if this is how I would do it. I don't know if our students would respond to that, but what do you think about this? What if we did something like this instead? And maybe you'd be surprised that they would go, yeah, however you want to skin it, I think this is the problem. This is my heart behind it. And so will you go and tackle that? If we don't voice those things, again, if we don't kind of externalize what we're internalizing, We walk around going, is this even my ministry? They're calling the shots and I have to do it. And, blah. And then you might end up having to do something that you're not going to do as well because you don't feel it. It's not in your bones. And, at our worst, we secretly want to fail. So then they don't make us do it again. When in reality, we could say, let's get to the heart of why you want something different or new or whatever. And then let's see if we can flesh this out in a way that I think makes sense for the context of this ministry. At the end of the day, your boss is your boss. And so we do have to just acknowledge that at the end of the day, it's on us to do what we need to do. And if our boss tells us we need to do something, we trust that God has put him in place, that our elder board are thinking through the right things, and that all those processes and things are correct. But I think sometimes when they give you an idea, you can do just a little bit of work to mine through that, get to the heart of why. And then I think you have some level of, I get to play with this a little bit to try to figure out a solution that you could actually really get behind.
That is so good, because I think what you're helping us realize is, like, even give yourself permission to ask questions to better understand and make sure you're on the same page. That kind of gets back to that, like, let's not make assumptions. Let's not make, the internal versus the external process that you were talking about earlier. I think the other piece of that I learned along the way was I hear you saying this is the end goal. Does how we get there matter? Because I might go this way and you might go this way, but as long as we arrive at the same, is that okay? And oftentimes, just even me asking that question to our senior pastor, he's like, actually, yeah, I don't, you probably are going to do it differently than I am. But as long as we arrive at the same thing, that's a win. So asking those good questions, Rothen, that's really smart. I like that a lot. So on the flip side, let's say now you have a big idea, right? You've been dreaming and you've been thinking about, like, hey, hear me out. Mega dodgeball tournament, and we're going to spend $8,000 on this event because we need to buy 200 dodgeballs, and we're going to resurface the auditorium and whatever wild thing it is that, the youth pastor wants to do. How do you pitch that to your senior pastor? Is it better to ask for forgiveness than permission? Like, what do you what do you recommend in that scenario?
I would say almost never. The reason why we go that route is because we think we'd be told no. Yes. But this happened. This happened with me. First, when I first got on staff, we didn't have groups for our junior high students. We only had weekend services, and I was adamant, like, we're gonna do groups for junior high. And I actually had like 3 staff members who deeply cared about me, like, it out of care pulled me aside separately, each of them. And they were like, do you really want the first thing that you do here to be a failure? And they meant it, I think, to be like, I want to protect you. And I was like, I think it's going to work. I really think it could be good. And luckily I was young enough and that I completely disregarded the wisdom from my friends who were older than me and had more experience in ministry, as young people sometimes do. And I was like, I'm going to do it anyways. And I'm glad I did, because it was great. But we were in host homes, and there was a lot of benefit to that. And, if you gave me 30 minutes to defend why small groups should be in host homes, I'll do it. And I think I'll do it well. And if you give me 30 minutes to fight why it should all be at the church and collective and all this stuff, I can do it. I think I can do it well, truthfully. But it was getting to a time where our middle school ministry now, our 6th through 8th grade ministry was growing, and those groups were just getting so spread out, and I was getting so much distance from the students, more than I liked, and I was getting more distance from leaders than I really liked, and my opportunities to develop them were slim, and I didn't like that. There was a lot of reasons why I wanted to move all of our groups into our church building, and that was a big ask, because it was, let's take this ministry that is working and growing. Like we have new groups every year, new students, parents are happy with it, leaders are happy with it, students are happy with it. And now let's move them into our church building with all the things that we don't want broken and touched and destroyed. And I'm going to bring in a lot of junior high students to that. And then we're going to have to clean more, and we're going to have to replace things. And, there was a lot of reasons why why I shouldn't have done it, or why people would say maybe don't do it. And I knew I was fighting an uphill battle. And so I legitimately wrote up a pitch. I mean, it was multiple pages. It was, these are the reasonings for why I think it's going to make the ministry more effective. Here's a sample schedule. Here's how I would get the different like teams in place to make sure that setup and tear down and things would happen, so that staff wouldn't have to feel the weight of that. And here are the actual wins that I think the ministry is going to experience that I don't think it is experiencing now. Here's what this is actually going to bring to the ministry and then ultimately our church. And I presented that. And I was given like a kind of hesitant green light to be like, well, you've thought through it. You know what you're getting yourself into. And really kind of what they said was, it's really hard to stop a thing that you start. So once it's at the building, it's at the building. And everything is seen at a different level. So like production value is seen at a way higher level when it's in the main auditorium than when it's being like airplayed onto someone's TV in their basement, you know? And so and the way that someone leads a game and, you know, all of those things. Are you ready for that? And I remember thinking like, this is one of those moments that I can lead up and build trust and prove myself. And because I had that mindset, luckily, and I had a great team of people around me and a volunteer team who were so bought in and were such great owners of the ministry, we were able to do that. But if I just walked into his office one day and was like, so I was thinking, what if I just totally switch this thing around and just use up the church building so that nothing else could happen in here, like every Sunday from now till forever in the evenings? I don't think we would have had the same reaction or the same response. I don't think I would have been given the same response. So you do the pre-work. You figure out what are the pros and cons. If you're going to make a decision that's going to be a big shift, do you actually want to live with the reality of that forever? And do you even know what that looks like? Ask all of the questions that you think you're going to be asked and answer them well, and then be ready to present that, and then be ready to know that, you know, if they say yes and it's day one better be great. Prove to them you knew what you were talking about, that it was the right idea, and that you did have the right things in place and you were prepared for it.
Yeah. Rothen, I think what you're sharing has so much wisdom, because oftentimes as student pastors, maybe regardless of what your role is, when you have an idea, you have to decide, am I looking to talk to our senior pastor, my direct report about this because I need to brainstorm, or am I bringing this to them because I'm actually making an ask? And knowing that is different, right? So I'm a verbal processor, and I would have times where I'm like, I just kind of want to pop into somebody's office and have the conversation because I really am trying to brainstorm it. I'm like, help me see the flaws in this idea. Help me, you know, tell me this is a terrible idea. Tell me if I'm onto something. What are the things I haven't thought through? Give me all that. But sometimes I needed to bring that to our staff meeting. And so I'd put it on an agenda and I'd say, I have an idea. Can we talk about it? Other times I would do exactly what you just said, where I tried to think, and do this if you have a problem too, like think through the solutions, right? Instead of just bringing a problem, come with a solution. It may not be the solution that you go with, but that's part of leading up, is bringing the solution, bringing a hypothetical. Here's an idea. Here's two possible outcomes. So I love what you're saying of like thinking it all through, make the ask. Very different than, hey, we're going to do this, or even asking for permission to. Wildly different.
As much as possible, put yourself in a position that you never have to say, I never thought about that. And so however many people you have to tell to get they're going to poke holes in everything. Like that one staff person who's always going, but how would that work? You know, ask that person, present it to them first, and get all the things, so that when they go, okay, so how are you going to do this? You go, yeah, I already thought about that. We have this in place and we're going to be doing this. And actually turn to page 4 on that document I just gave you, and you can look at it. But no, we say, and it's a little goofy, but it does work. Sometimes you do just want to brainstorm, and you don't want them to think I'm all in on this idea, because I don't know if I am or not. I'm just trying to figure out if this would even work or not. And so at Grace, we have this thing where we say we have wow hands, and then we have how hands, and it's goofy. But I'll walk into an office and I'll say, I need to see your wow hands. And that means you can't you can't poke holes in it yet, and you can't ask for details, and because we're not sure about all this stuff yet, but dream with me.
Mm.
And we'll get all these ideas in place, and it could be like that. Oh yeah, well, you take some of your idea and my idea, and we'll make it this, and it'll be great. Okay, how's that going to work? And then we can flip to the how, and we can start to poke holes in it. But that has been really helpful, because some people would never how, some people would never wow, and you being able to set the tone for what you want that meeting to be on the front end. And even to be able to do something silly, so that when they start howing, you can go, "Hey, remember, where's your how hands? Or where's your wow hands? We're wowing right now."
Uh,
Is a good way to kind of get past those obstacles when they're not needed, and then get to them when that's at the part of the brainstorming meeting that we're at.
so good. So good. All right, Rothen, there's one last piece of this equation that I think we need to touch on that we haven't.
Okay.
And this is a hard one. I'll be honest. Like for the people that with Dan in last week's episode, we kind of talked about, like, from a senior pastor's perspective, when you have a really sharp youth pastor and somebody's communicating well and they're leading well and they're killing it on all these levels, if we're honest as senior pastors, that can be intimidating. What do you do when you're in student ministry and you're looking at, like, the senior pastor's job and you're like, it's not that hard, I could do that. I'm a gifted communicator. In student ministry, if we're honest, a lot of the parallel things that senior pastors do, we're doing in student ministry. You're planning a service, you have a worship team, you're thinking first impressions, you're understanding building teams. Maybe you have a staff of people who are reporting to you. There's tons of parallels. What do you do when you kind of start feeling that, like, and we've been around long enough, we've seen this happen.
Yeah.
So many youth pastors go and be senior pastors. So many good youth pastors go and plant churches. Like, that's a thing. But from Dan, by the way, Dan did an awesome job of articulating what do you do when you're a senior pastor. Help us on the student pastor side or a staff member side, Rothen. What do you do when you start kind of having those thoughts? And maybe it is God calling you to do something else. But how do you walk that path out? How do you stay humble in that? What do you recommend? Give us some advice.
Well, first I would say I don't dream for Keith Meneer's job ever. So to think I'm sitting here going, man, one day, wouldn't it be great? He can have that. He's doing a really good job with it, and he can just hold on to that, and I'll be a cheerleader from my seat. But no, the reality is, and the longer you spend at a church too, I think the more you feel like you understand things, and the more you feel like your voice should have weight and should matter. And I am grateful to be a part of a church that also thinks that. And again, from when I was a director, my first year, 10 years ago, to where I'm at now, like, my role is way more complex, and I get to sit on different tables of, like, I'm in a creative meeting that gets to decide our series titles and trailers and bumpers and graphics and things like that. And then I also get to be on kind of our high level Pickerington campus leadership team. And then I also get to be what's called a subject matter expert, where I have influence over student ministry over all of our campuses. And I get to lead a staff table around staff development and expectations, and all that to say, there are other areas of influence you can have at a church that's not just the senior pastor. And if you are in student ministry and you've been in there for a while and you're like, I think I have good things to say about this thing that we do at our church, you should say that to someone. If you want to join your church's creative team, say, hey, can I start coming to those meetings? I think I'd have some good things to add. Now, be ready for maybe some harsh truth. Maybe you don't have good things to add. If you want to be like, again, one thing that I think our church does really well, I think Keith does really well, is he's asking those questions. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Where do you see yourself 3 years from now? How can we help with that? We care deeply about development. And so my personal development as a manager of people, as a ministry leader, and even as a communicator, I get a ton of that. Now, I can get more if I want more, and surely I could say no to an extent. and not step into some of those spaces. But more times than not, there are other opportunities for you to have greater influence at your church and on your staff that you can either ask to be a part of, or maybe if it's a smaller staff or smaller church that you could create. For a while, we just had one set of all of our like directors and pastors, and we would have a meeting, every so often. If your church doesn't have that and you want to be a part of that, and then that group of people gets to have a say in some decisions that the church is making more than any other staff member would, ask your senior pastor if a group like that or a meeting like that makes sense. But ultimately, I would also say there's a difference between if you think you can do a job and if you should do a job. And if I was doing what I could do and what I thought I would be doing right now in my life, if you'd have asked me when I was even 18 or 19, it wouldn't be this. But there is this reality of calling, and where is God leading you? And I think if you're if you're sitting in your seat and you're going, I could do that so much better for whatever reason. One, really get some details for why you think you can or what you think you would do, like truthfully. And if you really feel like it's significant enough, have a conversation with your senior pastor and figure out why they're making the decisions they're making or whatever it is. But if you're sitting in your seat going, I could do that, ask yourself, do I want to do that? And pray about that and say, God, do you want me to do that? I remember being on Operation Barnabas, for those of us, sitting on an upside down Home Depot bucket on one of the long trips, talking to my senior leader at the time, it was TK, and processing through with him, like, I'm going to go into real estate. Family owns a company. They're going to give it over to me. All I have to do is major in business, and I'm going to be owning this company, and I would be making all this money, and I weirdly really enjoy it and make my wife go to open houses with me, and she hates it. But I think it's fun. I think it's really cool. And I could do that. And I think I could do that really well. I think I would be successful in that. Doesn't mean I should. And so there is a reality that, we should be processing through what our calling is. And in that conversation that I had with TK was like, what do you enjoy doing? What are you good at? And what do other people kind of like affirm in you?
Yep.
And if you're the only one that's like, I think I could really do this, maybe wait, maybe wait till a couple other people go, hey, are you ever going to plan a church one day? Or would you ever be like a senior pastor or campus pastor or something like that? Let them lead the conversation to you. And then maybe that's a good sign that you might be ready. But yeah, I would say if you get to a point where you think they're really doing things wrong and you could really do it right, start with a conversation, but ultimately think through not just if I could do it, should you, and is that what the Lord has for you? And you got to figure that out between you and the Lord.
Yep. Rothen, I love your heart in that. You've given us a lot to chew on, a lot to think about here, a lot that benefits us. So thank you for sharing all of that. I think even just that last part about what you're saying is like listening to the Lord. Is this something that he's actually calling you to do? Or is this an area where honestly that there's something ugly going on inside of our hearts, and really trying to figure out where's that coming from? Did I give the enemy a foothold in some area where I got rubbed the wrong way and I'm bitter about something, and now I don't like, I've seen it too many times. I know that those things are real, and that's where church splits come from. That's where you don't communicate things with the senior pastor and tell them, hey, I actually have this ambition and I'd love to be developed in this. To our audience, please have those conversations. Please, it will always go better when you put those things on the table and you discuss them openly and honestly than keeping it and hiding it. And then, you announce, I'm leaving in 2 weeks to go take on this role. Like, please don't do those things. So I love the principles that you're helping equip us with, Rothen. Thank you for sharing that. So any final words of wisdom or advice that you want to leave our listeners with?
Let's break the stereotype Let's do it together. Let's maybe there'll be a new generation of what it means to be a student pastor, and we will be the most dedicated, hardworking people at our churches who always are eager to do good work with great attitudes. That would be awesome, right? Could you imagine if the people that are under us get to walk into that being the connotation for that position? That would be a gift to them. So we know the work we had to do to not be given the label that gets given to a lot of the student pastors. Let's give the generation under us a different label. And then also, if you see your senior pastor as the enemy, he'll always be the enemy. So don't do that. He wants you to win and succeed because he wants the ministries at his church to win and succeed. He's probably been in ministry longer than you, so he probably has a lot of wisdom that you could benefit from. And your gap in being able to get that and apply it to your life is probably your own humility to say, I have things that I still need to learn. And then last thing, know what's really important to them and make sure that you have those things ready. And so I know that after a camp or after even a big group night on a Sunday night, I know that on Monday morning, Keith's going to come to my office and we're going to have a conversation pretty early. My ability to, in that conversation, whether it is 8:57 in the morning, have real answers, that communicates things to him because those things are important. And so, let's just all do the work to be teammates with our senior pastors and not enemies. Let's learn from them because they have a lot of wisdom, I think, to give to us. And then let's create a better label of what it means to be, better picture of what it means to be a student pastor for the generation under us.
I love it. It's always fun, Rothen, when you have people come up to you at church and they ask like, so this is like a full-time job?
Oh yeah.
That's always fun. They're like, you just work like Wednesday nights or Sunday nights, like, right? You just serve. And so helping them understand. I also had a lady come up to me one time and I just got done preaching and she goes, so when are you going to be a real pastor?
That's what I was going to say. That's my favorite. Like, when are you going to be a real pastor? And then you go like, oh, well, I am. And they go, no, like a real one. And you're like, oh, yeah, I don't know when. I guess we'll see.
It's so fun.
Great question.
I love the break the stereotypes. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for sharing just vulnerably, even like some of the things that you've learned along the way. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. We really do hope that this has been beneficial to you, to your staff, to the culture at your church. We want to see you thrive and succeed, to have maximum impact for God's kingdom. And so if Momentum can be a part of that in any way, shape, or form, we would be thrilled for God to use us in that way. We want to come alongside to serve and encourage you to have maximum impact for God's kingdom. That's why we're here. So reach out. If there's a topic, a conversation, a guest that you would like for us to listen to or to engage in a conversation around a hard topic that you've been trying to solve, reach out to us. We would love nothing more than to be your go-to and most trusted resource. So email us at info@buildmomentum.org. And until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you, Rothen.
Absolutely.
Have a good one.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We hope you found it to be valuable. And if you did, would you share it with someone else in your network who might enjoy it? Also, would you please go on and subscribe, rate, and review it? That way you don't miss any more and somebody else will be able to find it too. Also, because we want to be your trusted resource, if you have a question or topic that you would like us to discuss on an upcoming episode, send that to us via email to info@buildmomentum.org, or you can send us a DM on any of our social media platforms. You can find us there at Momentum Ministry Partners. Also, if you need more information on our ministry, be sure to check out our website at buildmomentum.org. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next time.